My friends, we must understand that the enemy is cunning. He doesn't come waving a red flag to announce his plan. He doesn't walk through the front door of your life and say, "I'm here to destroy you." No, he's more subtle than that. He sneaks in through the little doors you leave unlocked, the habits you overlook, the cravings you excuse. And one of the most overlooked areas of spiritual warfare is the appetite. Yes, what you choose to put on your plate and into your body may seem harmless, but it can become one of the most powerful tools the enemy uses to control you. When the devil wants to weaken a believer, he rarely starts with a full-blown attack. He starts small. He works through patterns that seem natural. He whispers, "It's just a little, it won't hurt you." He tempts you with the same cravings over and over until what used to be a choice becomes a cycle. And what used to be a cycle becomes bondage. And bondage is where he thrives. Because if he can get you chained in one area of your life, he can slowly drain the power from every other area. Think about it. When your appetite is out of control, your mind becomes cloudy, your energy becomes drained, and your spirit feels heavy. Suddenly it's harder to pray, it's harder to stay awake and worship, it's harder to study the word with focus. That isn't just a matter of diet, that's a matter of control. The devil doesn't have to knock you down if he can wear you out. He doesn't need to destroy you with one big temptation if he can weaken you day by day through little compromises. Do you see how he worked? In the Garden of Eden, he didn't hand Eve a sword and say, "Kill your destiny." He simply pointed her toward food. Food became the doorway to disobedience. And what was lost in the garden was not lost through a battle of armies, but through the weakness of appetite. That is why we must guard this area so carefully, because appetite is more than hunger. It is a spiritual gate, and whichever spirit you allow through that gate will influence the rest of your life. Some of you wonder why you can't find breakthrough in your prayer life. Some of you wonder why you feel spiritually stuck. It might not be because you don't love God. It might be because you've given the enemy a foothold through what you consume. He doesn't want you to think of food as a battlefield, because if you did, you would realize how much ground he's already taken. But here is the truth. You were never meant to be controlled by cravings. You were never meant to live as a slave to appetite. God has given you authority not only over demons and strongholds, but even over the desires of your own flesh. The moment you recognize that, you begin to see food not just as fuel, but as a test of discipline, a place where victory is won or lost long before the big battles come. And so I say to you, don't underestimate this strategy of the devil. If he can't destroy you outright, he will settle for controlling you quietly. He will use appetite to dull your spirit and weaken your resolve. But you don't have to give him that ground. You can close the door he's been slipping through. That's why I tell you today, the devil's strategy of subtle control begins in places you least expect it, but it ends the moment you take authority back. When we look through the pages of Scripture, it becomes clear that appetite is not just about hunger. Appetite is a force that can either align us with God's purpose or pull us away from it. It is never just about the food on the table. It is about the direction of your destiny. From the very beginning, we see how the enemy has used appetite to interfere with what God has spoken. In the Garden of Eden, one piece of fruit became the doorway to sin. It wasn't that the fruit itself had magical power. It was that giving into that appetite led to disobedience. The appetite became bigger than obedience. And obedience is always the path to destiny. Think about Esau for a moment. He was the firstborn. The blessing of the firstborn was his by birthright. That blessing meant inheritance, authority, and the continuation of God's promise through his life. But when hunger came knocking, Esau traded it all for a bowl of stew. A moment of appetite canceled out a lifetime of destiny. And the enemy smiled because he knows he doesn't always need to take your blessing. He just needs you to give it up for something temporary. That is how subtle this battle really is. And don't think for a moment that the enemy has changed his tactics. He still knows how to lure people into trading what is eternal for what is temporary. He still whispers, "You deserve this now. Don't wait. Don't discipline yourself. Don't deny yourself. But what he never tells you is that in satisfying a momentary craving, you might be forfeiting the greater calling. Appetite is not just about taste. It's about timing. Can you wait on God's provision, or will you grab hold of whatever looks good right now? Even Jesus faced this test. After fasting 40 days, the devil came to him in the wilderness and said, "Turn these stones into bread." The enemy knew he was hungry. He knew the flesh was weak. But Jesus understood something deeper. Appetite was tied to his assignment. If he allowed his hunger to control him, he would be submitting to the voice of the tempter instead of the voice of his Father. So he answered with scripture, reminding us that man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God. Do you see it? Appetite is directly connected to destiny. If Jesus had failed in that moment, the cross would never have come. That's how serious this battle is. Some of you are wondering why your vision feels clouded, why your ears feel delayed, why your purpose feels distant. It may not be because God hasn't spoken. It may be because you have allowed appetite to interfere with destiny. The devil is clever. He will not always tempt you with obvious sin. Sometimes he will tempt you with something that seems harmless, something everyone else is doing, something that looks good to the eye but weakens the spirit. And every time you say yes to that craving, you are saying no to a higher calling. But I want you to hear this. God has not left you powerless. The Spirit that raised Christ from the dead dwells within you. And that Spirit gives you the strength to master your appetites instead of being mastered by them. You are not a slave to sugar or addiction or processed foods that rob you of energy and clarity. You are not meant to bow down to cravings that dull your spirit. You are called to rise above, to live with authority, to protect the destiny God has placed in your hands. Your appetite is not just about what you consume with your mouth. It is about what consumes your life. Will you allow temporary desires to dictate eternal outcomes? Or will you stand firm, discipline your body, and protect the calling that God has written over your life? That is why I say to you today, your destiny is too valuable to be traded for a moment of appetite. The devil has always been a deceiver. And one of his greatest strategies is to take what seems harmless and twist it into a weapon of control. Food was never meant to enslave us. It was meant to sustain us. But over time, the enemy has learned how to use even what we eat as a tool to weaken us. And I want to talk to you about 3 kinds of foods he often uses to keep God's people bound. Not because food itself is evil, but because when it is manipulated, when it is consumed without discernment, it can rob you of strength, focus, and even spiritual sensitivity. The first is over-processed food. These are the foods designed not to nourish you, but to keep you hooked. They are engineered to trigger cravings, to make you want more, even when your body has had enough. Do you see the strategy? The enemy doesn't just want to feed you. He wants to train you to lose mastery over your own desires. When you keep going back for more of something you know is not good for you, it becomes a cycle. And once you are in that cycle, he doesn't need to tempt you with big sins because he knows he already has your self-control tied down by something as simple as a snack. What you don't master begins to master you. The second is excessive sugar. Now, sugar in small amounts may not seem dangerous, but when it dominates your diet, it begins to dominate your emotions. Highs and crashes, energy spikes followed by emptiness, anxiety, and irritability. All of these come from allowing sugar to control the rhythm of your body. And here's the truth. When your emotions are unstable, it becomes harder to pray with focus, harder to stand in faith, harder to hear God clearly. The devil loves that because if he can't block the voice of God in your life, he will try to distort it. He will keep your spirit so weighed down by emotional swings that you lose the clarity needed to walk in your calling. That's why so many people feel spiritually foggy. It's not always because they don't love God. It's because the foods they consume are constantly pulling their minds and bodies out of alignment. The third is artificial and chemically laden food. These are the foods filled with things your body was never designed to process. Over time, they break down the temple God gave you. Your energy weakens, your health suffers, your mind slows. And when your body is sick, when your energy is gone, the enemy knows you will struggle to give God your best. How many dreams have been delayed because someone simply didn't have the health to pursue them? How many callings have been silenced because a person's temple was too broken down to carry the assignment? The devil doesn't always attack you with storms. Sometimes he just poisons you slowly through what you consume. But let me remind you, God did not create you to be a slave to any of these things. You are not meant to live hooked on processed foods, tossed back and forth by sugar highs and lows, or weighed down by chemicals that kill your strength. You were designed to live free, disciplined, and sharp. The Spirit of God in you gives you the power to say no, to break cycles, and to choose life over bondage. And every time you resist what the